Esther Chapter 2, Vashti's successor is sought. After these things, when the wrath of the king Xerxes had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what she had been decreed against her. So here he is, after he had thought about his actions, right? Then the king's attendant who served him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. I know, it's a weird, I can't say weird time because people, it's all the time, right? So let the king appoint administrators in all the provinces of the kingdom and have them gather all the beautiful young virgins into Susa, into the harem. No, wait, real fast, let me interrupt this. When we're reading the story about the king, it's not that God blessed this king. God didn't say he's a great blessing. It's telling the story. It's telling you what happened, and you're going to see God's hand in things. I think that's the key motive in this, not so much the, like, is this right what the king did? We don't want to get hung up on that. So the king appointed administrators in all the provinces and to gather all the beautiful young virgins to the citadel, into the harem under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the women, and let them their beauty preparations be given to them. He let the young women who pleased the king be queen in place of Vashti. And this pleased the king. So there was a certain Jew in the citadel of Susa whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, who had been deported from Jerusalem with the captives. He was the guardian of Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father and mother. The young woman was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her in as his own daughter. Esther finds favor. So it came about when the king's command and his decree were proclaimed, and when many young women were gathered together in the citadel, in the custody of Haggai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace and placed in the custody of Haggai, who was in charge of the women. Now the young woman pleased Haggai and found favor with him. So he quickly provided her with beauty preparations for her portion of food. And he gave her 7 choice maids from the king's palace, and then he transferred her and the maids to the best place in the harem. Esther did not reveal the Jewish background of her people or her family, for Mordecai had instructed her not to do so. Every day, Mordecai, who was an attendant in the king's court, walked back and forth in front of the courtyard to learn how Esther was getting along and what was happening to her. Now when it was each young woman's turn to go before the king, after the end of her 12 months under the regulations for the women, for their days of beautification were completed as follows. Can you imagine this, ladies? 6 months were in oil of myrrh, and 6 months were sweet spices and perfumes and the beauty preparations for women. Can you imagine just soaking in myrrh for 6 months? Then the young woman would go before the king in this way. Anything that she wanted was given her to take with her from into the harem to the king's palace. In the evening she would go in, and the next morning she would return to the second harem. And it said she would, and then they would turn to the second harem. And it says, who was to this other king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubine. She would not return to the king unless he delighted in her, and she was summoned by name. Now as for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who was taken her in as his own daughter, when it came her turn to go in, she requested nothing except what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of her, advised. And Esther found favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken into the royal palace in the 10th month. I wonder if it was, does it say what does she take with her? It doesn't. I wonder if there's more here. Okay, because it said that they could ask what they could take in with her. It doesn't say, just whatever they recommended. Okay, nothing in there. So Esther now becomes queen. Now the king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she found favor and kindness with him more than the other virgins. So he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen of the place of Vashti. Then the king held a banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his officials and his servants, and made a festival for the provinces and gave gifts in accordance with the resources of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was in the king's gate. Esther had not revealed her family or background, that her Jewish, just as Mordecai had told her. Mordecai saves the king. In those days, when Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs who guarded the door became angry and conspired to attack him. But the plot became known to Mordecai, who informed Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. Now when the plot was investigated and found to be true, both men were hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of Chronicles in the king's presence. So, all right, we're reading along here, seeing what's going to happen to Esther. I'll see you tomorrow.